So, having said that, let's want to call your first witness then.
We'll call Dr. Courtney Endres.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony given in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ready? Okay. Morning, doctor.
Morning.
Introduce yourself to the jury, please.
My name is Dr. Courtney Endres,
Could you spell that last name for the record, please?
Endres.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a forensic psychologist.
And what generally is a forensic psychologist?
Generally, we do evaluations of individuals, although sometimes we essentially educate the court on matters of psychology as they pertain to the law. So that usually involves an evaluation of a person, although sometimes I do what's called expository testimony, where I just talk about various issues that may apply to an aspect of the case.
Sure. Do you have a curriculum vitae that you've prepared?
I do.
And I'm going to show you Exhibit 274.
Thank you.
Does that document look familiar?
It does.
And does that appear to be your current curriculum vitae?
I think there's a couple of things that need to be updated, some continuing education that I've taken since then, but the bulk of it is correct.
Sure. Generally speaking, does it accurately reflect your education and training?
Yes, it does.
Offer 274, Your Honor.
No objection, Judge.
Received.
So, Doctor, could you briefly summarize your education leading to your career as a forensic psychologist?
Sure. I have an undergraduate degree in clinical psychology, and then I also have a master's and doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I did my forensic specialization with my pre- and postdoctoral positions.
So you specialize in forensic psychology in your fellowship?
Correct.
All right. And can you summarize your current practice for us briefly?
So I've had an independent forensic practice since 2012. I do primarily criminal work, so I work on NGI or insanity cases, competency issues. I also do a small amount of civil work with guardianships and protective placements, and then just answering general questions about psychology as they may pertain to issues in the law.
Are you currently licensed to practice psychology in Wisconsin?
I am.
And has that license been maintained and active in good status?
Yes.
All right. So did you evaluate Josie Dikeman at my request?
I did.
What generally was the scope of your evaluation?
I was told that she had some head injuries, and so you asked that I evaluate her to determine whether or not there was any impact from a possible traumatic brain injury, just to essentially look at her neuropsychological status. Also to look at some emotional behavioral components that might be the result of some reported domestic abuse. So to essentially do some diagnostic testing with her, interviewing, make diagnoses, and talk about her functioning as those things may impact it.
Did I also ask you to offer some expositional testimony on domestic violence generally?
Yes.
Sure. So did you meet with Ms. Dikeman?
I did.
And can you tell us generally how or what you were doing in that evaluation?
So I interviewed her about her background history. We did quite a lot of psychological testing. And I think subsequent to actually meeting with her, I did also review some medical records.
Okay. Did you, were the records that were reviewed or those common in your course of review?
Your Honor, I object to her discussion of the medical records that was not disclosed to us or contained as something that she reviewed in her report.
Judge, you filed this as a 40-day hearsay notice.
It's hearsay, but we weren't noticed that Dr. Endres reviewed them or that she was going to testify regarding them, Judge. So I'm not saying that the records are hearsay given the notice, just that her testimony on them was not noticed and therefore shouldn't be allowed.
It's not required by the expert notice statute, Judge.
Overruled. Go ahead.
Were the records reviewed common records to review in the scope of your evaluation?
Yes.
Or can we be heard on this?
Yeah, come on up.
Thanks for your patience, Doctor. So, did you meet with Ms. Dikeman to administer any testing?
I did.
And is the length of time that you met with Ms. Dikeman consistent with what you would normally require to conduct the type of testing that you found to be appropriate?
Yes, I mean, it varies by individual, but yes, it was fairly common.
Did you review the criminal complaint before meeting with Ms. Dikeman?
I did.
Is that common for professionals in your line of work to review that document?
Yes.
So I'm going to cover this in greater detail and break it down, but were you able to come to any diagnostic impressions regarding Ms. Dikeman after meeting with her?
Yes.
And what generally are your diagnostic impressions of Ms. Dikeman?
So cognitively, I found that she had some significant deficits with memory and attention, verbal reasoning, expressive language. Emotionally and psychologically, there were a lot of post-traumatic stress symptoms present, anxiety, depression, re-experiencing. The results showed that, test results showed that she tends to view the world as a very hostile, untrustworthy place. She's very passive and submissive in relationships. That's her tendency. She also presents as very, we call it flat, but basically a lack of emotional expression that you can visibly see, and reduced emotional reaction to what would normally be provoking events. And what I found was that that was the result of the traumatic event she's experienced and coping with that versus someone who is callous and uncaring about things. So that was significant. And then lastly, I did look for malingering. I did not find that she was malingering. In fact, she often minimized her mental health symptoms.
Okay. And just for the record, what is malingering? What does that mean?
Malingering means faking or feigning mental health symptoms for secondary gain.
Okay. So, Doctor, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 273. Did you prepare a report with your findings?
I did.
And take a look at that and just let me know if that appears to be a copy of the report that you submitted in this case.
Yes, this looks to be it.
All right. Are all the findings within it true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Offer 273.
Objection, Your Honor.
They've received.
Thank you. So, Doctor, I want to start at kind of the top here. You diagnosed Ms. Dikeman with something called major neurocognitive disorder. Is that correct?
Correct.
What does that mean?
So a major neurocognitive disorder means that there is noted cognitive decline from previous functioning, either reported by the person or by someone who knows them. Also, formal testing has indicated that there are some cognitive impairments in various areas like memory, attention, executive functioning, social, the ability to read social cues. And then all of that has to result in impairment in the person's daily functioning in various ways, but often in what we call ADLs, or activities of daily living, such as managing money, holding down a job, things like that.
What tests generally did you perform to evaluate Ms. Dikeman for that condition?
So I gave her a few neuropsychological tests. The most notable was, it's called the R-bands, or the repeatable battery for the assessment of neuropsychological status, and it looks at things like immediate memory, delayed memory, language, abstract, visual spatial skills, attention, maybe forgetting one. I also gave her the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, which is more of a screening tool for those same types of things. It looks at executive functioning, attention, memory, language. I also administered for short, it's called the DREFs, or the DELIS ratings of executive functions, and that looks at more of the emotional and behavioral components of executive functioning. So avolition or lack of motivation, apathy, emotional management, working memory, attention, problem-solving skills, things like that.
What's executive function?
Executive functioning refers to our higher order brain functions, such as the ability to plan or foresee consequences, problem solve, decision making. Memory and attention is there as well, but it's really sort of those higher brain functions instead of, versus like the aggression and pain and pleasure, the sort of basic impulse that comes from different parts of our brain.
Did you also administer a tool called the HELPS brain injury screening tool?
Yes, I did that as well. The HELPS looks at, as a screening tool, just looks at different typical symptoms of people who have brain injuries, things like headaches, trouble reading, trouble calculating, concentration and attention difficulties, depression, anxiety, things like that.
Are these the type of instruments that professionals like yourself rely upon commonly in coming to conclusions about the extent of somebody's deficits?
Yes, we all tend to have preferences with different tools. I would say that our bands is one of the most commonly used.
And have these instruments been validated?
They have.
What does it mean to say that an instrument's been validated?
It essentially means that it measures what it's supposed to measure. So it will look at other tools that claim to measure the same thing, see if it does an adequate job. It looks at different populations of people to see if it continues to measure the same thing it claims to measure. So it's a process of testing, repeated testing, to make sure that the test is actually doing what it says it's going to do.
Sure. So I know that you mentioned that the R bands test 5 distinct areas: immediate memory, visual, spatial, or constructional perception,
Yes.
Language abilities, attention, and delayed memory. Did I get that correct?
Correct.
I'm going to start with immediate memory. What is that?
So immediate memory is the ability to hold on to something for just a minute or two, just sort of repeat it back. So for example, I may list 15 words and then tell you to repeat back what you can remember. So that's testing immediate memory.
Okay. And how did Ms. Dikeman score in terms of her immediate memory?
Very low. I believe that was one of the extremely low categories, so it would have been around the second percentile. So when you say second percentile, that means that 98% of people who also took that same test performed better than she did. And it breaks it down by age groups too, so you're not comparing a 20-year-old to an 80-year-old.
Sure. What's delayed memory? Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. So delayed memory, we're talking about maybe a few minutes or a few hours. On the testing that I did, it's more like a few minutes, but basically at the beginning of the test, for example, the list of words that I mentioned that I might ask you to repeat for immediate memory, maybe 15 minutes later at a different portion of the test, I'll ask you, hey, do you remember any of those words? And then there's also another test where you're given options. So was this word on the list to look at different types of memory? But essentially delayed is waiting a few minutes or possibly a few hours to see if a person can remember.
We're not talking about weeks or months or years when it comes to delayed memory.
No, those would be long-term memories.
And how would delayed memory apply to being able to remember or recite events that happened hours earlier?
How would a poor delayed memory
Yes.
affect that? Yeah, a person would have difficulty. They may not remember a conversation they had a few hours before, or they may remember it incorrectly. They're likely to forget appointments, not be able to keep track of those types of things. They may be forgetful in where they put things around the house, things like that.
Now, your report indicates that Ms. Dikeman tested in the extremely low range for delayed memory. Is that correct?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that not only is her immediate memory pretty poor, but her ability to then try to recall it later on is even worse. It deteriorates even more over time.
Do you even, and you've explained the fact that of the 2% significance, is that broken down by age groups?
It is. I believe, from recall, I think it was like a age 20 to 36 band that she was in, or somewhere around there. But it's essentially by about 10 years or so. Once you get to the very young or very old, the bands get smaller. But yes, essentially her same age peers.
Generally speaking, how does having impaired memory like Ms. Dikeman affect a patient on a day-to-day basis?
Again, they're going to maybe misplace things around the house, forget where they put them. They won't remember where they're supposed to be at any given time. Conversations that can be difficult because people get embarrassed. They don't want to admit that they've forgotten things. So sometimes they'll say they remember, but they may not remember the full conversation. Just describing how things happened, telling a story, that may be much more difficult for people with delayed memory issues because they don't remember a nice chronological narrative that they can feed back to someone.
So in your notes in your report with respect to delayed memory, you had a line in there that says, once meaning was attached to stimuli, Ms. Dikeman struggled to remember anything at all. Do you recall that section?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
So some of the tests, they might give unrelated information. So going back to that list of words, just an unrelated list of words a person may be asked to remember later versus a short story. That has more meaning. That has, there's semantic value there. Well, once that was incorporated, she had much more difficulty. Usually you'll find the opposite with people in that it's easier for them to just remember things that actually they can find meaning to. We have little tricks in our brain to help us remember things when they mean something. But for her, my overall conclusion was that overwhelmed her brain. That was too much stimulus. And so it was more difficult for her once the information had meaning to it.
Can we take that to mean that if somebody with this deficit might struggle to identify what's relevant to a conversation and produce that information?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to get into this in a bit more detail later, but can stressors impede or make an already existing cognitive deficit worse?
Yes.
Generally speaking, in what ways?
Well, people, there have been a lot of tests that we've done over the years researching people's memories. And if you just give a person information to repeat backwards or back later and then compare it to maybe incorporating a stressful event or they're trying to multitask, people generally just perform worse when there's more things that are interfering with memory, other things that you're trying to sort of multitask in your brain that can become overwhelming, particularly for people that may be not operating at the level of the normal population to begin with.
Did you observe some of these same memory deficits in other instruments that you administered to Ms. Dikeman?
Yes, the memory deficits, that was consistent across everything.
All right, and I'm just going to talk briefly about the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. What does that do?
So that's a screening tool, looks at short-term memory, attention, some aspects of language, abstract reasoning skills, some visual spatial skills.
And you noted that Ms. Dikeman scored significantly below the normal range in that as well. Is that correct?
Correct. So you get a total score, and then you can also look at the different areas and how people performed. And her total score would indicate that her cognitive functioning is not in the normal level. It's below.
Does the Montreal Cognitive Assessment also measure delayed recall?
It does, by a few minutes, right?
And were the findings of the Montreal Cognitive Assessment consistent with what you found on the R-bands?
Yes.
You described in that section Ms. Dikeman's memory deficits as, quote, a glaring deficit in her working memory. What is working memory, and what did you mean by that?
The working memory is similar to immediate recall in that it's attention, being able to, so for example, if I say, I'm going to give you a series of numbers and I want you to repeat them back, but in backward order, you not only have to remember that information, but you have to remember it long enough to maybe manipulate it a little bit. So working memory is just sort of that information you need to hold on to for a few minutes and maybe be able to think about in more ways than just repeating it back. But it's that ability, essentially.
So the R-bands also measures language abilities, is that right?
It does, yes.
And what is expressive language?
So expressive language, as opposed to receptive language, which would be what we understand, expressive is our ability to clearly articulate our thoughts to another person. So things that could affect that might be a lack of extensive vocabulary. People with deficits there often mix up verb tense. They will say something past tense or future tense when they mean the opposite. They may just not have they have word finding difficulties oftentimes. And so just putting together a coherent narrative for people with deficits in expressive communication is difficult.
How can somebody with how does poor expressive language abilities, how does that interact with memory functions when trying to describe events?
Well, they exacerbate each other. I mean, if you already have trouble expressing your thoughts and then you don't remember parts of the story can get very confusing and jumbled and have gaps in it.
Okay. Would you agree that the ability to remember details and identify the relevant details is necessary to the ability to explain those details to somebody else?
Correct.
Your report indicate that Ms. Dikeman scored in the extremely low range for expressive language. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just generally speaking, how does that manifest with Ms. Dikeman?
Well, specifically, I mean, it was everything from vocabulary, so she had word-finding difficulties, naming objects, to verbal fluency. And that was on the RBANS test, just in speaking with her. It was also notable when she would try to explain things. Sometimes it was very confusing. She would stop, she would pause and try to go back and correct herself or fill in the details. It was just, she seemed confused trying to explain things. So yeah, it was evident in both testing and just talking with her.
Would you expect a patient with Ms. Dikeman's condition to struggle in an interview, for instance, with police officers?
Sure, because there's added stress there, so I would imagine it would be worse.
How about during testimony? Would you expect somebody with her conditions to struggle?
Right, similarly stressful situation.
So, do your findings support the diagnosis of a traumatic brain injury?
Yes, they do.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about the HELPS tool. What does that measure particularly?
So it's a list of things that are commonly found in people with traumatic brain injuries. As I cited some of them earlier, some of them are physical symptoms like headaches. Some of them are, inability or poor ability to do things like reading or calculating. Some of them are related to emotional functioning like anxiety and depression, but essentially it's a very long list of things that they've found are very common in people who have what we call TBIs for short, or traumatic brain injuries.
Sure, and I'm just going to list through the symptoms that Ms. Dikeman identified that you noted here. So,
Sure.
Headaches.
Yes.
And that's pretty common, as you explained.
Yes, it is.
Anxiety.
Yes.
Depression.
Yes.
Difficulty concentrating.
Yes.
Difficulty with memory.
Yes.
Trouble reading.
Yes.
Trouble calculating.
Yes.
Poor problem-solving abilities.
Yes.
Difficulty performing tasks in a job.
Yes.
Difficulty with judgment.
Yes.
And these were all symptoms that were identified with respect to Ms. Dikeman in the HELPS survey.
Right.
Now, did her responses to any of your question on any of the assessments corroborate the expressive language difficulties?
Yes, as I stated, just in interviewing her as well as on numerous other tests, she had difficulty expressing herself. She would become visibly frustrated when she was trying to make a point and she couldn't find the right words to say it, or she would get things confused or in the wrong order and it wasn't making sense. And I think at some point she even commented on that people commonly don't understand her correctly, or they don't understand her the same, I think she said.
Sure. And are based on your observations, was Ms. Dikeman's responses and her appearance consistent with somebody who's suffering from a traumatic brain injury?
I believe so, yes.
Now, that was one of the things that you mentioned, right, was that her fear that people were not understanding how she was, or what she was trying to convey.
Right.
Is that common for patients with traumatic brain injuries?
Yes, they become very frustrated because it's a change in functioning. Suddenly, they're trying to tell someone something and it's not coming out right. They can't come up with the words. They're using the wrong words. They can't tell a coherent story anymore, so they become very frustrated. A lot of times people just sort of stop communicating and sort of give up on it when it's not working, but it's very common for people to be frustrated with that.
What are some of the common reactions for somebody with those deficits if they're experiencing frustration and an inability to communicate?
Well, as I said, they may just sort of give up and say, they're not getting it. I'm not going to try anymore. They just become very frustrated.
Did you observe that reaction with Ms. Dikeman at all?
Yes.
So let's talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. You made a diagnosis of PTSD with dissociative features, is that right?
Correct.
What generally is post-traumatic stress disorder?
So a person has to have witnessed or experienced either something that was life-threatening or sexual assault, but essentially something where they feared for their life or their, basically, a threat. I'm sorry, I missed one. So they can also hear about the death or the threatened death of a close loved one. So it's those three things. They either were the victim of, witnessed to, or heard of a close family member or friend being seriously injured or sexually assaulted.
And we often hear about this label with the brave service members who come back from combat zones. Am I correct in assuming that this is not a diagnosis that's limited just to our service members?
No, it's not. I mean, you have to have experienced the trauma, but then there's a whole host of symptoms. There's 4 different clusters, different types of symptoms that a person has to exhibit to then be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So there are people out there that go through very traumatic things and just recover well. They don't develop those symptoms. So just having gone through the trauma doesn't mean you'll be diagnosed with it. You have to manifest the symptoms as well.
Is it important in making this diagnosis to consider the patient's history of traumatic experiences that she's had?
Yes,
And did you do so in the case of Ms. Dikeman?
I did.
Generally speaking, what was important about her description of prior trauma to making this diagnosis?
Well, she had reported a history of being sexually assaulted, physically assaulted on multiple occasions. She'd had 2 traumatic brain injuries also from an assault. So those things all count as traumatic events.
Okay. And is that the type of information that psychologists commonly consider when making a diagnosis of PTSD?
Yes.
So did you conduct any testing or other instruments to determine whether or not Ms. Dikeman's symptoms are consistent with PTSD?
I did.
What assessment in particular?
Well, I did a general personality inventory. It's called the Personality Assessment Inventory. And so that would, among other things, it would pick up something like trauma symptoms. But then I also gave her a trauma-specific measure because I'd been informed that that might be an issue. I gave her the DAPS, or the Detailed Assessment of Post-Traumatic Stress. And then I also ultimately administered a dissociation inventory. I believe it's the multi-scale dissociation inventory.
Let's start with the DAPS. What does the DAPS actually measure?
So it's looking at, there's actually now 4 symptom clusters that they've identified for post-traumatic stress disorder. That one actually only looks at 3 because at the time the instrument was made, we didn't really understand the 4th one. But it looks at 3 of the major symptom clusters for PTSD, which are re-experiencing, things like nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive memories, avoidance behaviors, and then the hyperarousal, hypervigilance type of symptoms.
Okay, let's start at the top. What is re-experiencing?
So most often people think of flashbacks, although that's probably one of the less common ones. More common are nightmares and just intrusive memories, people thinking back on the event without wanting to, and those things interfering in their functioning. Nightmares, they're not even always about the traumatic event. They can be about other things, but it's those chronic nightmares and sleep disruption that happens.
Okay, and did you find that Ms. Dikeman meets this symptom cluster for re-experiencing?
She did.
In what ways?
So she had frequent nightmares. She reported that it was often of being beaten by her partner. She also reported having memories happen when she didn't want them to, things triggering them, so loud noises, and she'd have a memory of one of those events.
How about being yelled at? Was that something that she described?
Right, being yelled at, any sort of loud noises, but particularly, yes, human voices yelling was one in particular.
All right, so what is avoidance?
Avoidance can be in 2 forms. One can be sort of mental, so people using drugs or alcohol to try to mentally escape from thinking about the trauma. It can also be physical separation, so sometimes those are things that are reminiscent of the trauma. It may be a particular type of person or a place or a smell, things that they avoid that somehow remind their brain of the trauma, but it's And a lot of times it's just people don't want to talk about it. That's why getting people into therapy for it is so difficult, because people are trying to avoid thinking about it.
Did you find that Ms. Dikeman experienced avoidance?
She did. She didn't want to. Oh, sorry. She did not want to discuss a lot of the details of it. It's a little difficult when she was in a relationship that was abusive, because then it's a little bit more difficult to avoid those things. People then tend to sort of mentally check out. But there were things that she said she would avoid, like semi-trucks, loud stores. And again, that would be the loud, sudden noise that jolts people, that jolted her in particular.
And finally, what is hyperarousal?
Hyperarousal can be anything from what I think is commonly known as hypervigilance, so sort of being on high alert all of the time. It also is being highly reactive, overreactive to things that normally a person wouldn't react to, but their brain is reacting to it when they have PTSD. It can be a constant sense of agitation or anger, or just that high, your nervous system is on high alert all of the time, essentially.
Okay. And did you find that Ms. Dikeman experienced hyperarousal?
She did. Easily startled is another symptom of that. But yes, she was very hypervigilant all of the time, felt very anxious and on edge.
Okay. What is the fourth symptom cluster?
So that's a negative alteration in mood and cognition. So that can be chronic depression, chronic anxiety, inappropriate outbursts of anger and irritability, impulsivity, reckless behavior that has the potential for, sort of self-destructive types of things.
Did you find that Ms. Dikeman described symptoms consistent with that fourth symptom cluster?
I did. She had depression, she had anxiety, but she also had the sort of, again, that flat affect that I mentioned earlier, that emotional restriction. That's also common. It's sort of a desensitization. So instead of overreacting, the person underreacts, because that's the manifestation of that altered cognition and mood for them.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what flat affect looks like in practice?
So it looks like a person maybe is very detached. They don't care. They're not reacting. You don't see any visible facial expressions changing. Usually people, when something provocative is going on, people react. You'll hear it in their voice. You'll see it on their face. Well, when people have flat affect, none of that is there. And it can be for a variety of reasons.
Is that a defense mechanism for patients?
It can be, yes. That can be one of the reasons that you see that. Is it's sort of a way, it's a coping way, because when people are overwhelmed by trauma and negative things, that's a way they can detach from it, is just by not reacting to it and sort of mentally separating from the dangerous environment.
Doctor, if somebody is displaying that flat affect and not reacting, does that necessarily mean that they're not experiencing emotions?
No, it doesn't.
Can that symptom be misinterpreted by others?
It can. I've seen that happen a lot, yes.
Let's talk about dissociative symptoms. What does that mean?
Essentially a mental separation from the environment. So again, it's a coping mechanism. When people are exposed to trauma, they get overwhelmed experiencing that, and so mentally their brain sort of separates from it. And a lot of times that comes with memory gaps, because they're mentally not there. Somebody watching someone who's dissociating, they may just sort of look like they're spacing out and they're not really in that moment, or they may not. But essentially the mind is not in that moment. It's separated from the situation.
Why do patients with PTSD sometimes experience dissociative symptoms?
To cope. It's being overwhelmed. The stimulus around whatever's going on is too overwhelming. They can't stay in it. And so that's a way that they try to separate from it.
Did you observe any symptoms with regard to Ms. Dikeman that were consistent with dissociation?
I did. So she not only described, in describing some things, excuse me, describe what sounded like dissociative episodes, but when I was talking with her about specific topics, she seemed to possibly be dissociating at times, where she would just sort of stop and not be responding and then get stuck and not remember what I had said to her, sort of missing part of the conversation. You'll notice that in people who dissociate is they stop tracking. They just sort of look like they're zoned out. They're not engaged in the here and now anymore.
Is there an instrument that you use to rate the symptoms of dissociative symptoms?
I did. I used the multi-scale dissociation inventory.
What does that measure?
A few different things. So it looks at emotional restriction. It looks at mental separation from the environment. It looks at memory gaps. I think depression. There's a few other scales.
Sure. Let's start with separation from the environment. What does that mean?
So as I was describing, it's where the person mentally, has to detach in order to cope with the environment.
And did you find those symptoms in Ms. Dikeman with the multi-scale dissociation inventory?
Right. According to the inventory, she had very high levels of mental separation.
All right. What does it mean when you say a high level of emotional restriction?
So that would be that flat affect I was describing earlier.
Okay. And did the MDI also support the finding that Ms. Dikeman had a high level of emotional restriction?
It did.
And let's talk about significant memory disturbances. Can you tell us what that means in the context of this instrument?
So just not being able to remember portions of events. The person, when the mind separates in a dissociation, it doesn't encode memories in the same way. I mean, they've looked at this in neurological scans, lots of research. The brain actually doesn't encode the memories the same. So it's not that they're not in there. Sometimes they are, and they can be retrieved in ways later on, but they don't go into the brain in the correct way that you can just pluck it out and say, oh, I remember that. So because of that, when a person goes through an experience, they may be missing pieces of that and not be able to correctly recall them.
Okay. Did you find any, was Ms. Dikeman's MDI results consistent with significant memory disturbances?
It did. That scale was also elevated, yes.
My understanding is that several of the other categories Ms. Dikeman did not meet in the MDI for dissociative symptoms. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about malingering. You said what malingering was, but do you have built-in measures to test for malingering when you're doing these instruments?
Yes, so there's a few different ways. There are instruments that specifically look for malingering. That's what they're created for. There are also often validity scales within tests to look for things like over-reporting of symptoms or under-reporting or inconsistent reporting. So those are also things that can give you ideas about malingering. Sometimes it's just looking at the consistency of responses, and I can maybe talk more about that later. But so there's everything from very specific formal measures to measures within more general measures, and then just behavioral observations we know to look for.
So it's built into the instruments themselves. Some of these are questions that you can look to for inconsistent or unreliable responses.
Right.
Any indication that Ms. Dikeman was malingering or exaggerating her symptoms as you discussed?
No, and as I stated in the very beginning, she actually minimized a lot of her symptoms. She didn't exaggerate them. She really wasn't trying to say that they were very strong for her. They would still come up in the instruments, but she minimized them essentially.
Why is that clinically significant?
Well, actually, what we find is people who have genuine mental illness, that's typically what they do. It's not the people saying, hey, I'm really sick, I'm really ill, this is what's going on. It's often the people who are saying, I don't think I have an illness, I don't think this is wrong with me. They don't want to talk about or acknowledge the symptoms, so that's pretty common.
Fair to say that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they have something wrong with them?
Right.
All right. Is it important in examining malingering to review prior neuropsychological testing or records?
Yes, if they're available, that can be helpful.
Why is that important?
So you're looking at patterns over time. How long have whatever these reported symptoms are been present? If it's a legal case, it can be very significant because if you have records from before the person was accused of something, that's significant because then if you're only seeing it after the fact, they had no symptoms before, wasn't reporting anything, they get accused of something, suddenly they have this whole host of symptoms, that's a little bit more suspicious. Whereas if they were reporting these symptoms long before, not in the context of a legal evaluation, that's a lot more, that's a solid piece of evidence that that's been there for a longer period of time, that there's no motivation to be creating fake symptoms.
In the course of trying to evaluate Ms. Dikeman's condition and whether or not she was malingering, did you review a progress note by Dr. Raymond List, a neuropsychologist?
I did, yes.
And approach with what's been marked as 270 or 275. Take a look at that, just make sure that you see it before.
This looks to be it, yes.
Okay. And what about Dr. List's evaluation of Ms. Dikeman in 2021 was important to your findings here?
He noted several of the same things. I believe he gave her a diagnosis of PTSD. Yes, he did. He also said mild cognitive disorders. The diagnostic impressions were similar. He found some of the very same things I did, the significant memory deficits with memory, attention, all of those kinds of things. He gave the R-bands, which it's meant to be something you can repeat over time, hence the name. So he gave one of the same instruments I did, found similar results, significant deficits with language and with memory. So just very consistent with my findings, and this was, what I believe, 2021. So, and I did my evaluation in 2023. So yeah, several years earlier and before the criminal allegations.
Would you expect that consistency in somebody who's not malingering?
Somebody who's not malingering? Yes. Well, yes, I would expect consistency in someone who's not malingering, correct?
My apologies, that was a poor question.
Too many negatives there, yeah.
Offer 275.
Any objection?
Just what was already put on the record, Your Honor.
Okay, received.
All right. So, just generally speaking, were you able to come to any conclusions about whether Ms. Dikeman's emotional presentation could be misinterpreted by others?
It often is. People have an expectation of how other people should look or react in certain situations, and particularly when there's a mental illness involved or cognitive deficiencies involved, you may not see what you expect, but that doesn't mean that a person isn't feeling emotions. That may be, as I discussed earlier, a coping or a defense mechanism.
What are some common triggers for PTSD or episodes related to PTSD that could trigger some of those symptoms?
Things that are reminiscent to that person for the initial traumas, and that's different for everyone, but loud noises is a frequent one. Loud noises, bright lights, being overwhelmed by a lot of people. Then it sort of gets more, those are sort of the more common general ones. Being more specific, it just sort of depends on the trauma. So maybe a certain smell or a certain type of person, if they were abused by a very overbearing type of person, maybe they had a beard, then everyone with beards, they may be on edge, things like that.
Sure. If a person with Ms. Dikeman's deficits struggles with memory, is that necessarily a sign that she's lying?
No.
And if a person with Ms. Dikeman's deficits struggles to display ordinary or normal emotion, is that necessarily a sign that she's lying?
No.
So, doctor, you have experience evaluating patients who have been survivors of domestic abuse?
Yes.
And are you familiar generally with the emotional and social aspects of domestic violence that help to perpetuate this cycle of abuse?
Yes.
Could you explain the dynamics just briefly to the jury?
Of
physically violent relationships?
Sure. Well, usually when there's physical violence, there's also some degree of emotional and psychological violence, and that can be a little bit trickier for people to identify as abuse. A lot of times the victim feels like it's normal, it's not as bad as it seems because of that aspect of psychological abuse in there as well. There's usually elements of control where, the person may be cut off from friends and family, The person controls the money, those kinds of things. They may convince them that they're not good enough to do other things. But essentially, it's a cycle where it's not always bad. You know, they have periods, we often call it the honeymoon phase, where people, they're getting along great and things seem to be just wonderful. And then sort of the tension builds up and there's, you know, some physical abuse or what have you, and then it starts over, they reconcile. But essentially the victim comes to believe that either A, it's normal or it's somewhat justified, and two, that it's not something that they can easily escape. There's all of these different components to the abuse that they come to believe that's just something they're in.
Do survivors of abuse have difficulty leaving their abusers?
Yes, very often. I don't remember the statistic anymore. I think it might be like 7 or 8 times is usually the number of attempts that people make before they can successfully leave an abusive relationship. So it's common that they have difficulty.
Why is that?
Because of all of those elements of control and sort of coercion and manipulation. A person, some things that are typical. So if people have kids, they'll say, well, I'm going to make sure you never see your kids again. Or they will cut off the relationships a person has with supportive people like family, friends. I've actually even seen people physically, you know, put cars in the driveway so the person couldn't leave, or take the person's car keys. They may control all of the money. They may do a lot of the emotional abuse where they're telling the person you're not good enough, nobody else would ever want you, you're not smart enough, those kinds of things.
Is it common for survivors of abuse to protect their abusers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
For all of the same reasons?
Correct.
Is it common for people in abusive relationships to view it as their normal?
It is. It becomes their normal. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned just briefly some of the factors of abuse, but am I correct in assuming that domestic abuse doesn't just include physical abuse?
No, typically you will also see the emotional component. And like I said, that can be much more confusing for people because wherein, you know, if they have a broken arm, they can say, well, yes, he broke my arm. But there's so much manipulation and psychological aspects to the other forms of abuse that those are sometimes worse.
Seems like an obvious question, and it is, but how about sexual assault? Is that a form of domestic abuse?
Yes.
Do survivors of abuse ever feel guilt over their abuser's circumstances when they're arrested or accused of a crime for their abuse?
Yes, it really is a mind game. I mean, I've seen so many victims just protect and lie for their abusers. I evaluated a woman who had been in multiple abusive relationships, which once she was out of them, she could see they were abusive, but when she was in the one that she was in, and he was doing the exact same things, she couldn't see it as abusive because it's just, it's very confusing for them, the mind games and the manipulation that occurs.
Are all of these reasons why survivors have trouble reporting abuse to the authorities?
Yes.
Is there anything in particular about Ms. Dikeman's cognitive conditions that would be an additional barrier to her leaving an abusive relationship?
Sure. So she's not functioning at 100%, either, you know, emotionally or cognitively. And so that would make it more difficult for someone like her to leave an abusive relationship. She doesn't, you know, she can't function as independently as someone without those deficits. And emotionally, she's constantly struggling. And so all of those things are just going to be amplified and making it difficult to leave.
Is Ms. Dikeman's PTSD symptomology consistent with somebody who's been domestically abused?
Yes, I believe so.
So, Doctor, are all of the opinions that you've offered here today to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Yes.
And I would offer her report if I haven't done that at this point. I believe I have.
I think it's already been received. But it will be I think it was already received.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cross?
Yes, Judge, thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Doctor.
Morning.
Dr. Endres, you were retained by defense counsel in this case, correct?
I believe, so. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Specifically by Attorney Zacher?
Yes.
Have you worked with Attorney Zacher on previous cases?
I have.
How many times has he retained your services?
I'm not sure. I don't keep track of numbers.
More than 5?
Possibly. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Maybe less than. I mean, maybe more, maybe less. I really don't know.
Okay. What about Attorney Bowles? He has ever retained your services in previous cases?
I believe so, yes. I saw him in the hallway, and I think I worked on a case with him in the past, yeah.
Okay. Were all of the cases that Attorney Zacher or Attorney Bowles retained you on criminal matters?
Correct.
And how many times has Attorney Zacher called you as a witness in a criminal hearing or trial?
Again, I don't know what the number is.
You have no idea?
No, sorry.
More than once?
Sure, yes.
Okay. More than 5 times?
Again, I don't know.
You keep records related to that, right?
Right. I keep records of every time I testify. I don't categorize it and keep track of the numbers of times I've testified for specific attorneys or in certain types of matters. I just don't keep those numbers.
You keep records as to your invoices for those matters, correct?
Right.
And have you been asked previously in proceedings how many times you've worked with a attorney?
Probably, although I don't remember specifically if I've been asked how many times did you work with this attorney, but I would guess I probably have.
Okay, you can't remember that either?
No.
Specific to this case, are you being compensated for your work?
Yes, I'm being paid.
And what does the fee structure for that look like?
My fee is $2.25 an hour, and then I have a flat rate for testimony, and then there's a different rate for travel costs.
So the time you spend doing the evaluation or communicating with counsel or writing your report, that's billed hourly?
Correct.
And then you have the flat fee for your testimony, is that correct?
Correct. It's different for in-person versus Zoom, but yes, they're both flat rate fees.
And at this point, how much compensation have you received related to this case?
Well, it was 2 years ago. I didn't look. I mean, it would have been several thousand for the evaluation and the report. I haven't been paid for testimony yet, but yeah, it was 2 years ago, so I don't remember what the exact amount would have been. I mean, it would have been several thousand, would be my guess.
Have you been asked questions about your compensation on cross-examination before?
Sure.
You know that question's coming, correct?
Well, they ask me if I'm being paid for my work or my hourly fee, yes.
And what is the flat rate you're receiving for your testimony?
It's $22.50 plus travel costs.
$2,250?
Correct.
And is your testimony that you met with Ms. Dikeman on August 4th of 2023, correct?
I believe that was the date. Let me double check. I mean, I believe you. That's probably accurate. I don't know where it is in here, but that was probably right. Or wait, August, no, my report was dated in May 2024, so I would have met with her prior to that. Oh, yes, August 4th, 2023. There we go. Yes.
And that was the only time you met with her?
Yes.
You're sure about that? Just a little bit of hesitancy there.
Well, I was just checking. Sometimes I do a follow-up via Zoom or in person. I was just sort of scanning down the list there. I don't see any notation of a follow-up.
And how much time of that 4-hour meeting was spent conducting the number of tests that you discussed previously?
Probably a majority of it. I mean, I don't have it broken up on here. I mean, I would have in the file how long each of the tests took, but generally interview, depending on the person and the issue, could be anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. And then testing, it all depends on the various tests. I could probably give you averages for a specific test, but I don't recall how much it was for her.
You don't recall how much time you actually spent talking to Ms. Dikeman?
And I don't have that in front of me, no.
You never observed Ms. Dikeman in her home?
No.
Or interacting with others?
Aside from the jail staff briefly, no.
You've never had the opportunity to observe her under stress or while she's experiencing heightened tension or stimulation?
Well, one might say my evaluation was a stressful situation, and being in jail is stressful, so.
But there were nothing going on during your testing other than the fact she was being tested that you would classify as being stressful?
Not that I'm aware of.
It was just the two of you in a room together?
Yes, that's correct.
The room was quiet. She could concentrate on your conversation and what you were talking about?
As I recall, I mean, generally I'll note in behavioral observations if there's something significant that was interfering, and I don't have those notes, so I would assume it was.
And, you know, given how the interview and the tests were conducted, you never had the opportunity to observe her in a situation where she may have been provoked?
Correct. It was just her and I didn't provoke her. I don't think so.
And I'm going to get into what you reviewed in this case in a moment, but were you aware that there are videos that have been introduced into evidence that show Ms. Dikeman in a stressful or provoked state?
I imagine there are. I didn't review a lot of the discovery in this case just because of the nature of the referral question.
When you say you imagine there are, is that just an assumption you're making, or is that something you were told?
I imagine because in these types of cases, there generally is video of body cam, various things.
But you didn't think that observing her in those states, if those videos existed, would have been helpful to your overall conclusions?
So there are a lot of things that can be helpful in evaluation, but once I've done my initial meeting with the person, the initial testing, interview, if I feel like I have enough information, then I don't necessarily get all of the possible sources of information. If I feel like I'm missing something, then I may seek it out. But again, for this question, it didn't seem like that was necessary.
What if some of that collateral information would have contradicted your overall conclusions?
What if?
Yeah.
It's kind of a broad question. I mean, certainly things, new information, different information can alter my opinion on things. I don't know what the specific issue is here that that you think may or may not have.
And it was your testimony today that you did review a portion of of Ms. Dikeman's medical records, correct?
I did. They were from Gunderson, I believe.
And when were those provided to you?
Shoot, I had a note in the file. It was after I had drafted the report on her, which is why it's not listed here. But I don't recall exactly when it was.
It was after you drafted the report. Was it after you submitted the report as well?
Well, I would assume so, but I mean, I'm not sure. Like I said, if I've reviewed something at the time I'm writing the report, it will be listed. But I do know that it was in the file, and I had a note saying reviewed and received. I just don't remember the specific date, but yes, it would have been after this was written.
And you have the ability to supplement a report after you've submitted it, correct?
Correct, but I generally, if an attorney appointed me, I would generally leave that up to them because they're asking the referral question. If they want an updated report, then I will do one, but it's not always requested. It's kind of their call.
Okay. So since it was their call, you didn't amend your report to include that additional information?
Correct.
Outside the record that was provided to you by defense counsel, you didn't review any other of Ms. Dikeman's medical history or behavioral health history?
I don't believe so, no.
Are those records you sometimes would consider informing an opinion?
Yes, again, it heavily depends on the referral question. So if this had been an NGI case, for example, I would have wanted to look at all of those, but here it was more a diagnostic. What do you see in terms of, test and results and current functioning? So sure, they may have been helpful, but they weren't necessary for this particular question.
It could have provided some insight into what those other providers identified or what the listed deficits were for Ms. Dikeman. Is that correct?
It may have.
Do you still have the medical record in front of you?
Oh, yes, I do.
Exhibit 275. And you're not aware if there were updated records after this note dated August 11th, 2021, talking about more current status of Ms. Dikeman's diagnosis. Is that correct?
Yeah, I remember there was a couple of 100 pages worth of records from Gunderson. This was among them. I don't remember the exact span, the date range.
You were given a couple hundred of pages of medical records from
It was
Gunderson's
less
review?
than 200, but yes, it was more than 100 as I recall.
And in terms of this particular note, did you have a conversation with defense counsel that this is the note that should be introduced at this trial?
Well, I don't know what he was going to introduce. He asked if I had seen the note by Dr. List, the evaluation note.
And when did that conversation occur?
I have no idea. I would have to look back at when I had a phone call with him.
Are you aware that Ms. Dikeman did have some improvements in her life related to her injuries after this note was authored?
I'm not specific.
Check vague.
If you can be more specific, go ahead.
I'm going to have you look at page, what's labeled on the bottom of 131 of Exhibit 275.
Okay.
And you see under ADL on the bottom of that page, it indicates driving not medically released.
Correct.
And can you tell us what ADL means?
Activities of daily living.
Are you aware that at the time Ms. Dikeman, or around the time of February 2023, Ms. Dikeman was driving again?
I don't know if I was aware of when she was or wasn't driving.
If she was driving at that point and had been medically cleared to do so, that would show improvement in her symptoms as were reported on in 2021.
Improvement from this 2023 that you're describing to me versus this time?
Yes.
I mean, there's not really any details here. I don't think I have enough information to make a statement or evaluate whether her driving had improved from this statement to what you're telling me. I don't know.
But you did testify that you had reviewed 200-some pages of medical records.
Right, and she discussed her driving as well. I mean, I recall that conversation, but I don't know. I have no idea what her driving looked like to compare it from one date to another. I'm not sure I could do that.
If we look on page 132, does it indicate in the doctor's summary that the PTSD, although still present, is under better control?
It does.
Okay. Were there any notes from your review of the medical records after this date that further discussed whether her PTSD was improving?
I mean, I'm sure being a diagnosis, they're going to comment on it and whether it's better or worse or what symptoms are presenting themselves, so that would be expected.
Dr. Endres, you talked a little bit about the source of Ms. Dikeman's PTSD on direct examination. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that PTSD can result from a number of traumatic experiences that can happen over time?
Correct.
The fact that she has PTSD doesn't identify in and of itself that there's a single source of that trauma. Is that correct?
No, and oftentimes as clinicians will talk about it as complex PTSD if there are multiple factors over a long period of time, although sometimes people just find it easier to say PTSD. But yeah, certainly it can be one or a multitude of factors.
And the psychological testing that you completed can't independently determine what event or events caused the PTSD.
Well, part of the DAPS, the Detailed Assessment of Post-Traumatic Stress Test, does ask that the individual, it does an inventory of events and then asks them to pick an event that they feel like was the worst and then rate that one. So it does actually in a way.
Okay. So you're relying then on the defendant's reports of what affected them the most with that testing.
Correct.
How comprehensive is that history that's given with that testing?
How comprehensive is the history?
Yeah.
Can you be more specific? I'm not sure what you're asking.
So you talked about them discussing, right, the history of traumatic events and saying which one affected them the most.
Oh, so it's, I think the first section is sort of a checklist of various events, asking if they've ever experienced them, and then there may be a rating or frequency with that, and then they pick one, and then they're going through the other sections are basically different symptoms or experiences that they might have had as a result of that event, and they rate the severity. That's sort of the structure of the test.
Would that include childhood trauma events?
Yes.
Did Ms. Dikeman list any childhood trauma events that affected her PTSD?
I believe, yes, actually yes, she did. There was some incidents when she was a child.
You didn't mention that in your report as a contributing factor to her PTSD, though, correct?
I may not have. I mean, there was a history of physical abuse throughout her life from various people. I don't know that I described each specific incident that she reported.
You also didn't mention in your report that sexual assault was a contributing factor to her PTSD, correct?
Oh, I thought I did. I thought I talked about different types of abuse, but I'll take you at your word. If I didn't specifically say sexual assault, I thought that I mean, maybe I can look, but let me look here when we talk about it. Let's see. Yeah, I think I do just talk about it as abuse, but I did mention, I think in the earlier part, that there was sexual assault. I can't find it here, but if I didn't, yeah, she experienced sexual assault, and that was a contributing factor.
But not something you put in your report?
So this report he asked that I just write up my diagnostic findings, so there's not the background history and all of that I would normally have in a comprehensive report. So that's maybe why it's not it wasn't specific to a test result. And then in the summary, I think I just referred to it as abuse.
So again, that was a choice made by defense counsel, not by you?
Well, the specific referral question is just do these, look at her diagnostically, write up the findings, discuss these other issues in general. Yes, that was the request.
Did you at some point communicate to defense counsel that sexual assault was was a contributing factor to her PTSD?
I believe he was aware, yes.
Aware because you told him?
I believe.
Work product privilege.
Sustain.
Just wanted to touch on avoidance real quickly, Dr. Endres. Is your testimony that somebody who does that avoiding could engage in that behavior by using drugs or alcohol, correct?
Correct.
You also discuss in your report Ms. Dikeman's inability to understand consequences sometimes. Is that correct?
Right. She had some deficits in executive functioning, part of which is being able to sort of make good decisions, problem solve. Part of that is being able to foresee consequences, yes.
And you aren't offering an opinion as to whether or not Ms. Dikeman has I apologize. That was a bad question. I'm going to go back to that in a moment. I believe what you'd said is that her consideration also of cause and effect is hindered, correct?
Correct. That's also part of that executive functioning ability.
And I believed when you're talking about predicting consequences, the phrase you may have used is diminished. Does that sound accurate?
Probably, yes.
And diminished doesn't mean absent, correct?
Correct.
You're not saying she's incapable of understanding consequences.
I am not.
Okay. And you aren't offering an opinion that she wasn't able to fulfill her legal obligation to protect children in her care, correct?
It was not my role to determine her level of responsibility for any specific act in this case or any case.
Doctor, can efforts to avoid detection reflect an awareness of consequences?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. What was that?
Can efforts to avoid detection affect or reflect an awareness of consequences?
Sure, that's often something that we look at, for example, in NGI cases is, did the person try to avoid detection? That may suggest that they were aware of the consequences. It doesn't always, but it's certainly something to look at.
Is it also something to look at if someone's attempting to conceal conduct related to consequences?
Judge, I'm going to object to mischaracterization, and I think it's an improper hypothetical.
Overruled. Go ahead.
I would probably just give the same answer that it depends. It can, but it doesn't necessarily.
And would trying to influence what other people, including children, say reflect an awareness of consequences?
Objection, mischaracterizing.
If the facts don't support the hypothetical in the future, it can be ignored. Go ahead. You can ask the hypothetical.
It may.
It may.
It may.
You made some or offered some opinions on how Ms. Dikeman may act when she's being questioned by law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
You said that you would expect her to struggle?
Yes, I would expect there was some difficulty in her talking to the police.
You review the video of Ms. Dikeman's statements that captured her interactions with law enforcement?
I didn't view any video.
So you didn't observe what she remembered that day or how she was acting related to that interview?
Correct.
And you can't tell the jury exactly what she was thinking during those interactions, correct?
I don't think anyone could tell the jury what she was thinking.
Behaviors like hesitations or pauses or inconsistent responses can have multiple explanations, right?
That's true.
You talked about those memory deficits, correct?
Correct.
Can they also be influenced by things like stress?
Sure. Yes.
Confusion?
Yes.
Can they be influenced by things like exhaustion?
Yes.
Can they be influenced if a person answering the question has a fear of the consequences?
Sure.
And can they also be influenced by a person who's attempting to avoid getting in trouble?
Yes.
You included in your report that Ms. Dikeman is overreactive to benign stimuli. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I think your testimony was that stress can make many of these deficits worse. Is that correct?
True.
Would that also apply to that benign stimuli?
Well, that statement, the overreaction to benign stimuli, that was specific to post-traumatic stress disorder, where people are reacting to things that aren't necessarily dangerous or things that one would react to, but because of the way their brain works with the trauma, they're reacting to it. Certainly added stressors, may exacerbate that.
I think you just said, right, that benign means non-threatening events.
They may be either not threatening at all to your average person, or they may just not seem that scary. For example, someone getting yelled at, one person might just think, oh, that's no big deal. It might be a little scary for another person. Somebody with traumatic stress due to physical abuse, that may be terrifying to them. So it's a different level of reaction to something.
They're talking about those ordinary, everyday experiences related to that person's reaction.
Correct. And that was just one example. There are lots of things that can trigger those overreactions in people.
And when we're saying overreactive, that means responding more strongly than the situation may objectively call for. Is that fair?
Right. I mean, and that may be outwardly seen and it may not be, but in the person's brain, yes, it's definitely an overreaction. It feels the nervous system is elevated.
You just said it may be outwardly seen?
Right. Sometimes, for example, you may be able to tell that person is jolted and afraid or upset or scared or whatever the emotion is. For other people, that may just be going on mentally, and you have no idea that they're terrified or they're whatever they're feeling.
So that can affect how a person would interact with other people, correct? If it's that outwardly seen?
Sure.
And that would include how they would interact with children?
I would imagine so, yes, anyone.
Children can obviously present stressful stimulation.
Sure.
Noise and chaos in a household can be stressful.
Correct.
Crying can be stressful.
Yes.
Repetitive defiance can certainly be stressful.
Sure.
And you also stated in your report that Ms. Dikeman tends to be more submissive than aggressive, correct?
Correct. Testing suggested that she has a more submissive personality style than aggressive or assertive.
Okay. I believe your testing also indicates that she is not manipulative of others. Is that correct?
Correct.
But that she does have a tendency to blame others?
True. Yes.
If additional information outside of what you reviewed in this matter contradicted those impressions, would that be relevant to your overall opinion?
Sure, things can always be relevant, but for me to say how my opinion could or might change, I can't say that without understanding exactly what the information is.
Absolutely. But if you were given information, including other interviews or body camera related to this matter or communication records, that could have an impact overall, correct?
It could.
If there was evidence of threatening communication by Ms. Dikeman, would that be relevant?
Threatening communication, I guess.
Objective vagueness and mischaracterization.
I'm asking a hypothetical, Judge.
Well, threatening communication, what are we talking about?
Yeah, be more specific if you want to.
If there is evidence of Ms. Dikeman sending threatening text messages, could that be relevant?
Judge, objection, vague, mischaracterizing.
It's a hypothetical. How can it be mischaracterizing?
The hypothetical, if I'm not sure the evidence supports that hypothetical, but go ahead and submit it.
So relevant to what, though? What you're asking, if there were text messages from Ms. Dikeman to, I don't know who, I'm not sure what you're asking, any more specifics.
You're saying that she's more submissive, correct?
Correct. In relationships, she tends to be submissive with people.
So if there was evidence that contradicted that submissiveness in the communication, could that affect your opinion?
Again, it's too vague. To say that someone's submissive doesn't mean that they don't show anger, that they may not send what you're terming, and I don't even know if it is, a threatening text message. I mean, I would need details to make any sort of clinical opinion on that. I think there's just too many generalities for me to accurately answer that.
And you weren't provided any communication records for your review?
That's correct. I was not.
If there was evidence that Ms. Dikeman was trying to influence others, would that be relevant?
Objection, vague, mischaracterizing.
Yeah, these are hypotheticals that are so vague, you have to be more specific what you want to ask her.
Sure, Your Honor. One of the materials you reviewed was a criminal complaint, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you considered that in making your opinions, correct?
Yes,
It was one of your sources of information.
right.
And why is that information helpful for you when you're conducting this kind of evaluation?
Well, I mean, it gives context to what she's being accused of. But the referral question wasn't for me to make any determination about, her level of responsibility or guilt in that at all. It was literally to look at diagnostically, what does she look like and how does that affect her functioning? I wasn't asked to, make a specific opinion about the particular offense or anything else. It was just very general about her functioning and how it affects her, her behavior.
In your review of that, did you identify any behavior that could be classified as aggressive?
Did I identify any behavior in the criminal complaint that could be construed as aggressive?
Yes.
Sure, she's being accused of homicide, so I mean, that's aggressive.
The criminal complaints included information about the forensic interviews of the children, correct?
Yes, that I recall. Mm-hmm.
And the allegations in those forensic interviews were that Ms. Dikeman kicked Alex, correct?
Correct.
That she choked Alex.
Right, I remember that as well.
There were allegations of Ms. Dikeman hitting Alex.
Correct, I think, yes. Hitting, kicking, yes.
There were allegations of threats to the children.
Yes, I believe so.
And there was discussion of Ms. Dikeman telling one of the children not to talk to professionals.
Right, I believe I recall something when they went to the hospital, she may have made that statement. I don't recall the specifics, but I know that she was hesitant. I thought it was in the context of a hospital visit, but I don't recall specifically.
A hospital visit where Alex had a broken leg, is that?
Right, yeah.
And there were also allegations involving differential treatment of Alex from the other children, correct?
There were, right.
And despite reviewing those allegations, the testing then suggested that she was not aggressive or manipulative of others, correct?
Correct. In the general sense, it doesn't mean someone's never done anything aggressive, but it's looking at overall the PAI and specifics, I guess what we're talking about. General tendencies of a person. Do they operate in the world in an aggressive manner? It doesn't mean they've never done anything aggressive, but it's saying overall in general, that's not how she operates with multiple people. It certainly doesn't mean that the person's never committed an aggressive act or was not aggressive with someone.
It doesn't determine whether those historical allegations are true, correct?
No.
It also doesn't erase contrary information that had been reviewed by you before you had conducted that psychological testing, correct?
It doesn't what?
It doesn't erase that contrary information, the information about her being violent or threatening to the children.
Right, that was the information in the criminal complaint that you're referring to. I guess I'm not sure what the question is.
That was the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. I don't have anything further.
Redirector.
Sure.
We'll take a break once we're done with this witness.
Doctor, is it common for somebody with a doctorate level degree to get paid for your time?
Yes.
And is your opinion for sale in the process of working with attorneys and judges and prosecutors?
Now, I do all my evaluations objectively. If a defense attorney asks me to do the evaluation, I may have an opinion he doesn't like, and then he may not use it, but it has nothing to do with who hired me. My opinion is based on my expert opinion.
And have I, in fact, used you as an expert before and declined to have you testify because of the content of your opinion?
Yes.
Does the fact that you're being compensated for your work in any way impact your opinion?
It does not.
And Doctor, you were asked some questions about what you did or didn't review. Would it be typical to review more than 100,000 distinct discovery documents in the course of a review like this?
100,000, that might be excessive. I mean, it all depends on the referral question. I don't always need to look at all of the discovery, but yes, that would be a very voluminous discovery file.
And is it typical for us to provide you with the documents that we think you might be asked about?
Correct.
Okay. Now, have I ever asked you to form an opinion solely on the basis that you were paid?
No.
Have you testified for the state in your career as well?
Yes.
And I think what Ms. Rude was referring to earlier is that you were called as an expert in this county, in this courtroom, actually.
Your Honor, I object to this.
Well, have you served as an expert by order of the court, not either attorney?
Yes.
Okay. And have you done that in one of my prior cases?
Yes.
So, Doctor, I'm going to ask you a fairly obvious question. Why weren't you able to observe Ms. Dikeman in her home setting?
She was incarcerated. She had already been arrested for this offense by the time I met with her.
And is it something that's required to form your opinions to observe somebody in their home setting or out in the community in order to come to a diagnosis like you made?
It's not only not required, but I mean, it's not logistically feasible most times because a lot of times people are incarcerated by the time I meet with them.
Okay. You were asked about whether or not you intentionally tried to trigger a stressor or traumatize Ms. Dikeman to review her.
Your Honor, that wasn't my question.
Well, okay.
She intentionally tried.
Okay. You were asked if you ever observed her in a stressful or triggering situation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that something that you would ever do, trying to provoke or trigger a traumatic situation for somebody that you suspect has post-traumatic stress disorder?
No.
In fact, it might be considered professional malpractice to traumatize a PTSD victim. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
All right. So I want to ask you a little bit about the submissive issue. You said that she's primarily submissive. Does that mean that she's going to be submissive 100% of the time?
No.
Can submissive personalities push back against people at times?
Yes.
And do submissive people always shut down in response to these triggers?
No. These comments were made in generalities. Certainly people act differently at different times.
And Doctor, you were asked why you didn't complete a comprehensive report. Is it common for people in our position to try and limit the cost by asking you for just the facts that we need?
Yes, there's always a very specific referral question, and that's what I need to address.
Do you assume the truth of the allegations that you see in criminal complaints?
An objection to relevancy.
She was asked about it and whether or not it...
They were talked about as allegations, Your Honor, and I think this goes to Hazeltine.
Well, no, she was asking about the complaint. You can ask about the complaint. Overruled.
Yeah, in the course of your allegations, or in the course of your examinations, do you assume the truth of the allegations in criminal complaint?
I assume that that's the report of the witnesses to the best of their ability. I evaluate the veracity of everyone's statement. I don't assume anything is 100% true. It's one person's perspective. That's why I try to look at different sources of information.
And did we ask you, Doctor, to make a finding at all on the credibility of the complaint?
No.
Do the instruments that you administer to Ms. Dikeman, do those take into account external allegations like a criminal complaint at all?
No,
Is it fair to say that those instruments are just plugging in input into the instrument or the test so that you can score it later?
correct.
That's all I have.
Recross?
Just briefly. Dr. Endres, there's just your testimony that you don't assume the truthfulness of witness statements in the complaint, correct?
Correct.
And that's why you look to other sources, correct?
I assume that every statement, including the person I'm evaluating, may not be 100% true. I'm looking at consistency and trying to evaluate the veracity of all the statements I review.
But your testimony was that's why you look at other sources, correct?
The more sources, the better is sort of a general rule, yes.
But in this matter, the only source you reviewed was statements of Ms. Dikeman and her testing in your interview, correct?
Her testing, her interview, and the criminal complaint. That is correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay, go ahead.
Is that also why you rely on these malingering scales that are built into the instruments to determine if somebody's potentially lying to you or not?
Correct. That's one component of determining the truthfulness of their statements.
And in any of the instruments that you examined, was there evidence that Ms. Dikeman was malingering?
No, there was not.
In comparing the consistency of Dr. List's findings to your own, was there any evidence of malingering?
No.
That's all the questions I have.
Anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Is there any exhibits there for you to hand those to me? Thank you. Nice step down.
Thank you.